Great. So thank you everyone for joining. We've got a really great topic today to discuss. It's going to be three common pitfalls that utilities might face with deployments around LTE and private 5G. Now, I'm joined here by Oscar Gomez of Nokia. We'll do a couple of quick introductions and then we'll dive into our topic for the day. So I'm Daniel, the Director of Tech Alliances with OneLayer. I look after our global partnerships for tech alliances, and we play a really critical role in the ecosystem for private cellular deployments. And we work very closely with Nokia, and I'm looking forward to having Oscar kind of explain a little bit more about our partnership and how we work together. So, Oscar, over to you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, OneLayer, for the invitation. Basically, what I'm going to be talking about is basically the cybersecurity attack surface exposure. But before that, again, Oscar Gomez. I'm a Nokia pre-sales solution architect, and I've been working with Nokia since 2005. I've been lucky to have worked all the way since 3G, and now what we have is in 5G. And obviously, our main area of focus is now private wireless. So let me just quickly move towards showing you what we're talking about with the private wireless cybersecurity here. All right, so when we have a private wireless network, one of the very first things that comes to our attention is the fact that these are 3GPP standard networks. What that means is obviously two things. Number one is define or design for security, the famous acronym DFSec. And the second part is the fact that we are using the same protocols that our current customers, right, public networks use. However, it's in a matter of security, right? We're following all the different 3GPP standards for security. The most important part is once they leave the design and the production area, right? They get into a particular area of deployment, then we have to look after several things, right? Number one is from the protection itself, right? If your network has access to the internet, it has to be obviously well protected. And for that, we have multiple partners where we can protect our networks from attacks coming from the internet. Moving to your left, right? And that's where our Nokia network security portfolio comes into play. We need to protect multiple areas, right? The first one is from the core network itself, is basically the different network functions are based on software that is running in many instances over what we call the OEM type hardware and software, right? That could be the traditional Linux, it could be OCP, or it could be anything related to an appliance. However, those functions require upgrades, require different changes that if one is not careful, right, it can introduce particular vulnerabilities that need to be looked after. Also from the OSS perspective, right, all your operational support systems to manage those networks, those obviously you will have multiple users, you will have multiple administrators and actual people who are performing those changes and monitoring your network. If you don't have the right permissions or access management with those users, it could be an issue of vulnerability where your system will have potential problems, right? Somebody deleting a file, somebody moving a particular directory, or just basically trying to tamper with the original software. For that matter, you need to have control over your own users. Again, they may not be malicious, but they may have certain permissions that if you don't have control over that can destroy the reliability of your network. Moving to your left, right, and that is very important. As your network is growing, as we know, communications within network functions are basically managed via protocols such as CTP2, where allows you to have a secure communication between those network functions. And those have to be managed, right? If they are not managed, if some of those certificates for encryption expire, you will have the problem where your system will go down, right? And that is something that, again, for a mission critical network is not possible. So we are able to support you with our certificate management to make sure that during the life cycle of that encryption, it goes all transparently and it goes all clean, and you will have your uptime with no issues. The final part is basically where OneLayer and Nokia are working in a joint manner. And that's basically with OneLayer. Why? Because a private wireless, obviously, you will have all your UEs or devices connected to that network, right? And most of those devices, if not all, are in external areas, outdoors, could be different regulation systems. It could be in your trucks, right, to maintain communications with your crews, and also with smart metering, for example, right? All those devices need to be secure and need to be proactively monitored, right? What traffic they are carrying, what type of protocol are they using? Are they able to communicate? Do you need to update those devices, right, with the right firmware or software? And that's where OneLayer and Nokia come together, and OneLayer supports us in the end-to-end way. And from there, let's take it with Dan. Thank
Thanks,
you, Dan.
Oscar. Yeah, thanks, Oscar. I think what's great about this slide and kind of having you walk us through that blueprint is that it serves as really what an ideal look would be for securing a network environment from the device through the network infrastructure and all the way out to the traffic exiting that. So I think that's a perfect place for us to start. And what we'll do through the talk today is kind of reverse ourselves back into where some of those challenges might be for customers along that journey to get there. From our experience working with multiple different utilities customers jointly and both independently, and how we can bring some of those learnings to the audience today who's interested in kind of getting to that ideal state that we just looked at. So before we dive into some of those pitfalls, I think it would be great to kind of take this up one level higher and maybe talk about why this is such an important topic today. I know that from our perspective, we're hearing a lot of things from our utilities customers about the importance of building in security to their network project from a reliability perspective, right? And ensuring that, hey, we have some really great use cases that we want to be able to see come to reality, but we need to make sure that these networks are reliable, that the service maintains, and that, you know, for example, there's some use cases where customers want to drive and start to build in AI into their strategy from a utility perspective on how they're actually analyzing the data and information that they're collecting from all these different devices. Well, how can I build out a network and run those types of use cases if I don't trust the data? So, Oscar, maybe you can kind of speak a little bit to your experience and why you're hearing security maybe rise up the checklist of importance when customers are working with you to kind of think through how they're going to build out these network projects.
Perfect. Yeah. As a few years ago, right, always security was something like, well, you know, due to budget or due to a particular limitation, right, security is going to come as a second phase. Unfortunately, nowadays, especially in the utilities environment, right, that is no longer a second option, right? You have to start from scratch or from the start. When you are planning your network, that is the number one thing that you have to be looking after. And the reason is very simple, right? I mean, obviously, as we explained earlier, the vectors of attacks have increased, number one, because you have a wireless network. But the most important part is obviously bad actors are looking forward to disrupt your core OT network, right, by any means possible. So from that perspective, it's a day one activity. And it's not just saying, oh, well, you need to have it. It has great benefits, right? Once you start, for example, with a POC and you have your solution in place, it's much easier to scale it up and to integrate it with all your planning rather than coming later into the game, right? Especially in OT environments where it's more difficult to have access, right? It's obviously much more controlled than a traditional IT or public network. You need to have that planning in place when you deliver. And that is the reason why we have to have very early focus, right? That will allow you to organically grow a network with all the different security functions required.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I also think about how important it is to build it in from the blueprint in day one. It's a common gap, I would say, in the way many organizations think about security is, they sometimes they don't necessarily think they need it until it's too late. And I think if we think about the current state of global affairs and how security is becoming even more critical for mission critical segments within, any type of vertical, really, building that into that blueprint early, building it into that POC, as you mentioned, means you're ready to pivot and scale it and go from there as different attack vectors and as different sort of threats kind of emerge for these different types of organizations. So building it in early keeps you ready. And I think that's really important. And that's why this matters today. So let's talk about pivoting over to maybe our first pitfall here, which relates to the way our customers think about applying security to a cellular environment. And I think typically this is maybe a pitfall number one, which is applying traditional IP models to the cellular environment may not necessarily be a surprise to cellular networking engineers who understand this at a tactical level. But when we think about bringing in cybersecurity teams and IT teams and various stakeholders into a private cellular project and the way that they think about wanting to extend their existing firewalls or their existing asset management tools and how we actually want to move from a POC into operational, we do have the challenge that cellular networks are not fundamentally the same as the traditional IT and OT networks from an IP-based perspective, and that does introduce some of those challenges. So I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit, maybe kind of just highlighting what some of the differences might be there and how, and then I can even kind of layer on top of that with where we see sometimes those security tools not being able to manage into the cellular environment.
Correct. Well, very first thing, right? I mean, I do believe that cross-pollination is critical. In other words, the IT teams can bring a lot of good knowledge and competence experience on what they have seen in their own organizations thus far. And the same for the OT environment, right? Where we are able to learn a lot from those. Yet at the same time, you are correct. The networks may have similarities in the concept of obviously, sometimes we use the same OEM type software, the same OEM hardware as a basis. However, the critical part comes as the control models, as you indicate, right? Number one, OT is a very restricted environment, so we have to cater for that. And the second thing, which is very, very important, for each of those services that you are offering with your private wireless network on an OT environment are very different. I can tell you, from the utilities perspective, right? You may have transmission, you may have distribution, and you may have generation, right? All those three environments, although they seem similar, right? In the concept of, they are carrying electricity for our own electricity, gas, or water to our own consumers, right? From the perspective of what devices need to be used, how the devices are used, and what is the objective of one of each of those devices is very different than from a traditional IT IP type model network on the IT environment.
Right. Yeah. And I think that just introduces some complexities that customers need to navigate. And I think the earlier that they understand, we need to find a way to adopt the cellular environment into the traditional tools. I think that benefits everyone at the utility who wants to see the private network succeed. It helps to build a group of of champions within your organization to help and actually scale these projects out to full operational. And I think that's a really important piece that some of our viewers can take away, is to kind of think through that from the early stages and how I'm going to work with the cross-functional teams at my utility to make this a success.
Mhm. And one final thing, right, with the devices as well on the OT environment, in many instances are not humanly managed, right? As you would have sometimes in the IT environment, such as a computer or a phone, right? Many of the devices, especially, for example, smart meters, they're unmanaged, right? Humanly unmanaged. You are not able to see it physically in many instances. And the control obviously has to be improved in that sense, right? Make it more automated and also have that visibility that allows you to proactively modify or update, secure those devices day by day.
Great. I think that's kind of a perfect segue into our pitfall number 2, which is really just having a much better understanding of what the devices are that are running on the network and getting a better sense of all the details related and the context related to those devices, right? And so, as the OneLayer story goes, the underlying infrastructure from a private cellular network was built and sort of designed to support the major telco and MNO carriers, which obviously is focused on connectivity, and for most part that sort of ends at the SIM. But in the OT environment, and why Nokia and OneLayer work so well together, is we want to extend that visibility beyond the SIM to the actual device that's there. And I think collectively we help our customers to address that. And so when we're able to do a better job of understanding what those devices are that are on the network, we can then apply better security policy against the actual device types to map to different segmentation models, zero trust access models that we want to apply to the network to help it become more secure. And then there's a ton of different operational benefits as well, which come to, a huge wide area network, having a ton of devices that are connecting to it, and being able to identify actual devices out in the field that can really support the way that our utility customers operate. I think is a tremendous benefit. Have you seen that much in your conversations with customers, and can you speak to that experience for them?
Yeah, that is absolutely right. The two main items that I have here is, once the device is out there, it's very difficult to troubleshoot, right? Because we only have visibility from a traditional private wireless networking. What is the SIM assigned to that device, right? And obviously, as we know, right, in many instances, we have CPEs where a SIM has been assigned, but there are devices connected to that CPE, right, which we have no visibility. And that makes it very difficult for the operations teams to troubleshoot. I'll give you a quick example, right? I mean, there are some CPEs that are required to have certain policy, right? They can only carry data. They can only carry certain, information, let's put it this way, back to the network. But when you lose that visibility, you don't know what that device is actually doing. It may be connected properly, but they may not be doing what it's supposed to be doing. And from that perspective, I think that is very, very important. And the second thing I've been hearing is, as your number of devices starts increasing in your private wireless network, right? Once you go beyond the initial testing, you will have a lot of devices that require monitoring, right? And will require operations type changes, right? Like configuration, right? To make sure that it's actually in an optimum way to deliver the services that they are supposed to. And that's where the complexity starts coming, right? Having many manual process creates not just a difficult task and a resource-intensive task, it also can become an issue where you may have, with so many manual processes, a greater risk for error, right? And having issues with your devices. So to me, that's where OneLayer really comes and supports this, right? Automating, having that visibility in close to real time, making sure that those devices are supposed to be doing what they are designed or defined to do, without having to have any or minimizing those operational errors.
Yeah, and I think the automation component of that is so important, especially when we're at scale, right? I think this is something that can be managed in a small environment where you can manually assign, hey, this is a SIM card that's assigned to a specific device, but you scale that up even slightly, and it becomes extremely challenging for small network teams that are trying to run very large networks at our utility customers, and it's a huge value opportunity for them there.
Exactly. And some of those, as I mentioned, right? What if you have one of those CPs in one of those, in a pole somewhere in a neighborhood, and something happens, right? An accident or something like that. You don't have that visibility, right? If the device is stolen or just somebody tries to tamper with a SIM card, those kind of things, right? This allows you to have much better visibility rather than just saying, I just see a SIM card out of my network and I don't have much visibility on what is really happening.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. We've heard from some of the utilities that we work with just how much having that visibility of the device has helped them to do diagnostic work early on when they identify that there's an issue, to be able to say, hey, is this something that's a challenge or an issue with the actual device itself? I can go in and see what's happening. Is the device communicating? Is it offline? Is it on the correct APN? Is something happened with the SIM card in this device? And really get a better understanding there. Or is it something from a network or a power situation? Like, we need to go out there and do a bit more diagnostic, but they don't necessarily need to send someone out on site even just to do some of that basic diagnostic work. They're able to do that remotely. And in many cases, that can actually reduce the number of truck rolls that customers are sending out to do some of this. It's just a really powerful way to centralize a lot of that information for the network operator. And we're hearing that time and again from customers. So
yeah, no, there is nothing better than having the right information to make a decision, right? As we know, truck rolls, the price of diesel, the price of gas, just having that truck roll, assigning a crew to come along and trying to troubleshoot in a distance, that causes it's a financial impact, right? So, right. And one thing in between, and it's very interesting, right? Because we were just talking to one of our customers yesterday, and one of the things that came is, once you start growing in number of devices, you will have certain devices that will require a mass update, right? Let's say firmware. Hey, it needs to be, in order to secure it, you need to increase this. But sometimes they have identified that the issue is, once you have a new firmware, then the performance starts degrading on that device. So it's not the radio side, right? Which obviously you would think is the radio or the Nokia network. It's actually the device itself. And again, it's nobody's fault, but you identify that and you say, hey, I realize that the devices that are having this degradation are all this particular brand, right? So you're able to either roll back that firmware or at least, troubleshoot in a manner that is more consistent, right?
Yeah, that's a great example. Perfect. Awesome. I think we'll move on to our next and final pitfall, which I think is a theme, Oscar, that we've kind of explored from the first moment of this presentation, which is designing for day one and not for day 500, right? And we've talked a lot about that, what it means to actually start with security, device visibility, understanding what a holistic end-to-end, the ideal vision for network security looks like, and starting to work that into the plans for a network earlier on than some of the network operators may think is necessary, right? And I think we talked about what some of those risks look like, the ability to actually implement security retroactively is more challenging. And I'd love for you shared some thoughts around that. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that. But then also, as the network scales and becomes more complex and there's more people involved and there's more infrastructure that's been built out already, reverse engineering that just becomes more challenging. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think this is actually completing the two initial pitfalls, right? I think this is the end-to-end type of a combination of that. But yeah, from that perspective, again, it is the fact that when you are planning for your private wireless network, security, cybersecurity, and device management has to be one of your priority one thoughts, right? And again, it does not matter what the rollout or the timeline is expected. You need to make sure that you start from the day one, because that will allow you to, once you scale, right, automate your operations, make them more secure, right? And finally, right, without having to increase your resource base, right, with regards to human resources or with regards to the different applications, with a good plan, you are able to standardize that growth that you will see, right? And the final thing, as you rightly say so here, the multi-site complexity. Just keep in mind, right, that as we know, right, that we have multiple vendors in your operations. You still have a lot of legacy technologies that you need to maintain, and that is not an issue as long as you are able to help yourself with the new network, right? Making sure that this as automated, as a simple design as possible. So that to me is essential, especially when you start scaling into your private wireless network. So,
Oscar, you mentioned, the complexity of multi-sites, the complexity of multi-vendor in the ecosystem. It's near and dear to my heart and the work that I do every day, right, with OneLayer and how we work with our ecosystem partners. I think what we've shown today is some of the ways that Nokia and OneLayer integrate, not just from a product offering perspective, but how we actually think about holistic security as a layer on top of the connectivity that Nokia offers. And so with that in mind, I think we share a lot of the same vision for what these projects could and should look like for utilities that are considering moving from the business case and should we move forward with a project like this into, hey, I want to start planning how I can do this correctly. And I think that we have a very strong and compelling partnership to bring that forward as customers kind of think through that. And so, thank you for sharing all of your thoughts today and helping us kind of get a better picture of some of the experiences you've seen from customers and how we can work that back into the community who are thinking about kind of going on this journey as well. So we're very appreciative of it, and we look forward to more opportunities to learn from you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. OneLayer. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
And if anyone has any questions, we've kind of run out of time for that today, but please send them through the chat, and we'll be happy to address those as we go forward here. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.